Utilizing the energy and political movements of punk rock, a new bedroom band has one goal: to lift spirits with their electronic blend of fuzzed-out punk and deconstructed pop. Olenka, Krakus, and Jeffrey Moon created Positive People. Their song Praise Be is about mental health journeys, mourning, and gratitude. Let's meet up with Olenka, who shares her journey with music, English literature, her family's flight from communist Poland, and how she became involved in the Lower Mainland's punk scene.
My name is Olenka, or Alex, but Olenka is my kind of Polish name and the name that most people would kind of know me by in terms of like the music that I've been releasing and playing for a while. I was and still am in like my previous band, Olenka and the Autumn Lovers. That's kind of a band that was more active, I'd say probably about 2008 to about 2016, 2017. And then I got an injury, and then the pandemic happened, and et cetera, et cetera. And so it's kind of been on hold, slowly kind of happening again. One of the musicians that was part of that band, who was my partner, is Jeffrey Moon. And Jeffrey was our drummer, but Jeff is a multi-instrumentalist, extremely talented musician and sound engineer, basically, and video editor. So he has all of the skills that we need to do the work of being a musician or a band or whatever, and does it very well. And Positive People is our kind of new little side project for me, I guess, but a second project and kind of more of a focus for Jeff's creative pursuits, because Olenka's stuff is primarily music that I write, and songs that I kind of create in my own sort of space, usually with a guitar, because I play classical guitar, not professional classical guitar, not like John Williams or someone. I can't get through any actual real classical pieces, but I kind of finger pick through my own little folky stuff. And but with Positive People, Jeff is kind of at the helm of the kind of compositions, in the sense that it's kind of like the REM model, in the sense that I'm Michael Stipe and he comes to me as the band and is like, here's the music, and can you write a song? Can you write lyrics to it? So it's a very fun and different way of approaching songwriting. And that's not exclusively the case, because in the case of our most recent song, Praise Be, that we just released, he wrote the lyrics for that one. So in that sense, I'm sometimes providing a bit of feedback, but then I'm kind of channeling the ideas, the emotions, the melody, and delivering it. And we share vocal parts in Positive People, whereas with the Olenka stuff, I've tended to kind of be the main voice, and then I've tended to sing with a lot of female singers in that one. So, but yes, as you were mentioning before we started recording and we were having our secret conversations off air, it's much more kind of rough and punk, and kind of, it's very poppy, but it's it's kind of infectious melodies that we like to sing. I've kind of always written that way, but it's a bit of a diamond in the rough in that sense. It's just like grittier and has more of a charge, and is kind of driven by electric guitars much more than like a string arrangement with a classical guitar and like a full kind of sort of orchestrated band, the way that the music of Olenka stuff sounds. So that's a bit of an introduction to the projects and to Positive People in particular.
I think over this whole pandemic, we've seen people have to find new ways to be creative. With everything closing up, people couldn't go into recording studios, projects were shut down. So being able to create something new out of there, finding new opportunities. We've seen so much creativity, so much authenticity of indie artists or indie performers. With Bo Burnham's performance on Netflix, what was it called again? Inside? That sort of energy, at least for myself, I am really enjoying when people can showcase themselves and it doesn't feel corporate.
Certainly, what the pandemic, I think, did shake up paradigms around how to create music, but maybe not quite introduce a whole new way of doing things, because it's not as though DIY music hasn't existed in the past. I mean, so much of the West Coast, some of like the whole slacker rock genre of like Pavement and that kind of period, mid 90s music, grungy, sort of dirty pop punk stuff was like people on 4-tracks, so like cassette-based 4-tracks, recording in like living rooms and, just making noisy recordings that captured like a feel, but didn't necessarily, have that whole deep, extremely expensive like studio experience. So that existed, but I think what the pandemic did was kind of open the door to doing that kind of thing as like a more obvious and maybe a more natural way of creating stuff. I think it's made it more of a norm. And it's, in some ways, it's liberated people because it opens the doors to doing things professionally, but at home where you have total control. And this kind of comes back to, I think, one of your kind of questions to me about this idea of bedroom band, right? Bedroom band, bedroom recordings. I mean, that's really that's the essence of that, right? It's like you've set up a home studio in your bedroom, or in our case, the little hallway that's attached to our bedroom where like Jeff has all of our audio equipment set up in this tiny little space. And it's all DIY, it's done on your own. So it's that aesthetic. It has potentially a slightly more lo-fi kind of sound. It has the ability to. It certainly, as a genre, can sometimes evoke that kind of music. But given the quality of the equipment that's available now for people to record podcasts and for people to record music and like their musical projects, it's actually probably a lot easier to sound really good. So at home. So then it becomes a matter of an aesthetic choice. And so in our case with Positive People, some of the dirtier sound that we've been creating, or that Jeff's been kind of creating, is an aesthetic choice. And it's not because we can't create like extremely clean sounding, close mic'd, like super crisp, perfect vocals, but because we're looking to make things maybe a little bit more disoriented and or disorienting, and for a specific effect. So there's consciousness and there's an aesthetic, and then there's just the practicality of being at home during the pandemic, and you got to keep creating.
The amount of variety or diversity that can come from it with punk music. It started out with people just playing in their garages, this anti-authoritarian kind of mindset going in, kind of like, F the system, let's do this thing, let's just, play music. Mom, Dad, you can't tell me what to do kind of thing, like back in the UK. And it's really cool seeing kind of, I guess, it was already there, but seeing that resurgence of that energy of, we don't have to follow the mold. Like, just aesthetics, like, they don't have to be like perfect, pristine things. With myself, I'm starting to get into a more like rocker punk aesthetic, like going to the thrift store, finding like roughed up denim jackets with like frayed edges, patches on there. It's just a way to break away from the mold a little bit.
I think the pandemic made it easier for people to realize that they could have that level of control and that level of, if they weren't anti-establishmentarian to begin with, it could open their eyes to it, right? Because certainly there are benefits to recording in studios, and it's not as though we're not aiming for, again, for us, it really would depend on the song, what we decide to do with like the production and how it's going to sound. But, we are also, kind of becoming gearheads. Like we haven't been in the past because it's expensive and because I've been blessed with knowing tons of engineers who have great equipment and, great studios, like professional studios. So, recording was something that you paid for, and you got that, the service of that, and you got access to all of that great equipment. And so there are definitely benefits, but certainly during the pandemic, when people who wanted to keep creating started to kind of try to do stuff more on their own and really kind of expand their abilities and record at home. I think that whole anti-establishment mindset can kind of be awakened because you realize, oh, wait, there's this whole system, this whole ecosystem that exists around the work that artists do. And a lot of times artists are the last people in line when it comes to musicians, let's say, in particular, last in line when it comes to being rewarded in like financially, in terms of sometimes even having decisions are in the production and stuff, because they're not necessarily the ones engineering the recording. And so so it's like, if that's the establishment, if there is this establishment even in the music industry of doing certain things a certain way, of delivering a certain kind of aesthetic, then I think the fact that you start doing stuff on your own at your computer, figuring out like programs, investing in the odd mic here and there, and just kind of expanding your skills and equipment, it starts to kind of open your mind and to the fact that you could be doing this a lot more on your own, and that's very empowering. So I think that that's a very cool thing that has come out of this experience, and is kind of a return to that sort of punk ethos, the anti-establishment ethos that you were discussing earlier.
And it can feel so good when you put a lot of love, blood, sweat, and tears into a project, and you can actually have ownership over it. How many times have we heard a conversation, the whole Taylor Swift issue with, she didn't own some of her songs and she had to re-record a bunch of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of power in asserting your control over your kind of musical destiny. So I think with Positive People, I mean, there is definitely, you asked about the name, asserting or kind of taking control or taking like power and guiding this project is certainly one of the positive aspects of it. But generally, as like a name and as a sense of being, or a motivation for the band is really about kind of being grateful, and about kind of, we have this silly mantra that kind of motivated the band name, which we have occasionally used when we get really upset, or something happens in your life and it's just easy to be angry or sad or depressed or whatever. And so it's like pivot to positive. And so it's really about like treating this project as a way of reconnecting with positive feelings. It's also a name that's kind of loosely based on a Bry Webb song, Bry Webb from the Constantines, and a beautiful, delicate song. It's this idea about finding a way back into being positive, because our society can be overwhelmingly negative, and our experiences, especially experiences during the pandemic of loneliness, of feeling disconnection, that those things can kind of take over your experience. And so you need to find a way to try to reclaim moments of joy and of positivity, because if you don't, you're going to kind of sink further and further down in the mire of like all of that difficulty that's around us.
That's something I've been hearing from a lot of people I've been speaking to over the past year, of being able to get into an optimistic mindset when approaching, just life. So, kind of coming back to the history of you, you are a student of English literature, master, and completing your first 2 years of PhD. Return to grad school.
Yeah, I mean, I studied literature for a very long time, and I taught it to some extent along with like philosophy and theory and stuff. So it has that type of education, a humanities-based education, makes, especially one in which you're focused on the written word, spoken word, performance, and the kind of the sensitivity and the level of concentration and effort that can go into songwriting and into poetry writing and into writing, in so many different genres. Like when you study that as deeply as you do at like a graduate level and into like a PhD, you really you become exposed to the kind of deep nuance, historical nuance within like the tiniest of word choices, the tiniest of grammar choices, the tiniest of spacings, right? And so it just makes you a lot more self-aware and conscious of the craft of writing. So for me, I've been inspired by a lot of literature, but I've also obviously written or attempted to write. Like as many teenagers, I wrote a lot of really bad poetry. I recently came across some of it because we've been packing for our big move, and I reread some of it, and I was like, I'm okay with shredding almost all of this except for this, and this. But anyway, so, there was always that sense of that kinship. When you study it that way, it really kind of opens the doors to tools to become much more conscious and selective about how you approach writing. In the context of positive people, what's been super interesting and fun is that whereas when I write for myself, I kind of have a clean palette. I can, I sit down at a guitar, I see what happens musically, or I see what happens like vocally, or even sometimes blurt out a word here and there that kind of prompts a certain idea that kind of gets expanded. But in the case of positive people, particularly with Jeff coming to me with like these complete or almost complete pieces, it's like a different way of writing and a different way of like thinking about all of the subtext that's been delivered to you already in the context of the instruments, the tones, the key signature, the fact that it's major or minor, where things turn, and then trying to take this pre-existing shape and understand like what you can do with it with words. And so it's like kind of flexing different muscles that I haven't necessarily haven't had to do in my own kind of completely independent songwriting. So it's very interesting in that sense. It's a lot more collaborative, and for me, as both a creative person and a person who has studied so much creative material, literature, and like theory and philosophy, it's a fun way of like really kind of pushing beyond maybe certain skill sets that have kind of been ingrained in my previous approach. But what I would add is, I mean, literature is like a wealth of lessons, it's not just in terms of life, but in terms of artistry, how to create. So when you study that, when you have the privilege of studying that, as I have for, into graduate degrees and then after as an instructor and like teaching different aspects of it, it really it teaches you a lot of lessons that you can bring into your own sense of artistry, your own vision, and your own skills. And so what better way to learn than to learn from the great creators of the present, but the past as well.
As someone who has fumbled his way into a writing career, I can really appreciate people who take the time to invest themselves into the craft, to find ways to, articulate themselves in unique and new ways. It's always fascinating for me to just hear how people approach things differently. It's always fun because writing is so cool. There's so much you can do with it.
When you study it, like I have, and I'm not by any means unique. I mean, there are tons of people that study literature, and hopefully that will continue, and not everyone goes for MBAs. But when you do that, it's really an apprenticeship in life and in art. And so, it's a great way to learn how to take care with words. But with this sort of more experimental way in which, at least for me, in which we're approaching songwriting and positive people, part of what's fun is like really kind of pushing the envelope around what I would traditionally do with songwriting and then how I'm approaching it. So in the context of positive people. So so with this one, there was the emotional kind of interpretation because Jeff wrote the lyrics, and I think maybe I gave him, maybe we talked a bit about it, but it was really kind of his space, and he's been kind of growing more and feeling more confident kind of doing that sort of thing. But with some of our previous releases, like Specific Northwest, for example, that's a song that we released, our second song. This is our third release. Praise Be is our third release. And with Specific Northwest, I really kind of went with the words. Like the words came and the meaning was a bit abstract, and rather than try and like fight to make it fit more and make it more coherent, I kind of went against my instinct, against the grain, to make it a bit less coherent, to make it more imagistic, to make it a bit more strange and maybe not fully clear. And that was a lot of fun. It made it more and less difficult in some ways because I'm used to crafting and storytelling in my songwriting. And in this one, it felt a lot more kind of imagistic and fragmented and kind of hinting at certain experiences. And so, there are lots of ways to kind of keep growing as a songwriter in the craft of songwriting and lyric writing and all of that.
One of the interesting things in your bio for Olenka and the Autumn Lovers, it talks about your family's flight from communist Poland.
That's a lot. Yeah, I mean, my family came to Canada as refugees. So we left Poland because of, at the time, the communist regime was kind of cracking down on people's rights. Not that I mean, there were a lot of restrictions in place even before the kind of crackdown that we fled. And I was very young, I was 4 when we left. I turned 5 in Austria, where we were initially refugees. And then when we came to Canada, I was still 5. And my brothers were born in Austria. But I mean, it shapes you in the sense that I think it shapes a lot of immigrants. And I think we are just, either this was the week, or there was a day or two ago was like Refugee Awareness Week or day. So it's actually pretty appropriate that you would bring this up. But yeah, I think there's a sense of, for the dispersed communities, the diasporas, there's a sense of longing for your home that's never accessible again in quite the same way. There's the sort of the physical breaks in contact. When we left a little bit before the government introduced martial law, like maybe even within a week or so. And my father was kind of peripherally involved in the solidarity movement, which was kind of like the union movement, anti-government, slowly kind of burgeoning movement that helped free Poland from, and yes, we're talking about Poland, communist Poland. So yeah, the solidarity movement was like the kind of initially the kind of strike of the union workers that gradually became a broader social movement that gradually brought down the communist government there. And the communist government there was basically, a puppet government of the Soviets. And so just even his peripheral involvement, like I swear he helped organize like a few newsletters or something. Like I don't think it was extensive, but even that was cause for enough concern that he could be taken to prison, thrown, like sent off to like a work camp. Like I think friends of his were sent to work camps in Siberia. So it was pretty like real and visceral. And so my parents decided to leave. It was an intense experience for them for sure. And then for us as kids, it's basically and then kind of growing up away from that culture, you just always feel between the two worlds. You feel like you belong when you don't belong. And so there's a lot of kind of a lot of self reflection that I think happens with refugee kids and immigrant kids.
And I guess that ties directly into the punk scene as well.
That of course, yes, because punk as a community was often a place for, the antisocial, the less the kids that weren't accepted, the weird kids. It was, to some extent, it still is, although I think it's a broader kind of experience culturally now. The weirdos seem to be the cool kids now. So, but, it was definitely a way of finding, reclaiming power, gaining a sense of identity, gaining a sense of politics, right? Because so much punk music is like deeply rooted in social justice issues. And and political kind of the beginnings of like a political awareness and education. So with Positive People, it's nice to kind of come back to that in these different kind of poppy ways. And depending on the songs, it's going to be, poppier or maybe kind of more punk, more kind of aggressive and like scratchy and like dirty and all of that stuff. And yeah, it's going to be exciting because there's still so much to be aware of and to be angry about and to be socially active about. And so the genre kind of fits the times again.
World Refugee Day, I think it was on Monday, but I could be wrong as well. But it's today was National Indigenous Peoples Day, Indigenous History Month, as well as Pride Month. Like there's so many things that minority groups, individuals that are facing our systems, frankly lacking. I'm just gonna gonna say that.
And so you need a space, whether it's like a genre that has a history of doing that kind of thing, a space where you kind of confront those sorts of issues and you think through them and you talk about them or you shout about them. There's a lot of catharsis in shouting in songs. So that's also kind of nice, although most of my singing so far has been pretty sweet and pretty. But maybe in another song, not down the line, there will be some more shouting. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, with these 3 projects, I know, there's a potential album that you've been working on. So that's going to be super exciting. Yeah, art is going to save us. That's what I believe. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, it's a way of saving yourself as a creator, because it's an outlet for some of the anger that you can feel. And it's a way of reorienting to positivity, right? Like the one thing that I would kind of want to close with in terms of both the song that we just released, Praise Be, and just like our project in general. I mean, the song is about gratitude and grief. It's about like paying homage to the people and the pets and the friends and the places that we love, and the things that can kind of, lift your heart and kind of put make you almost teary-eyed because it's so beautiful and so profound. And it's that beautiful stuff that makes you feel like you should strive to find like positive things to help heal your soul from all of the negativity that our society is kind of foisting on us increasingly. And but I certainly wouldn't want that message to be a simple message of just like, oh, all we need to do is, think positive, because, it's all about us. It's our attitude. And as long as we think positive, everything will be fine. Well, no, it's important to stay positive, even though everything around you can be extremely overwhelming, but it's absolutely appropriate to be angry and to find ways of taking action. And that's actually positive work, right? That's positive social work. So that sense of positivity is really, it's a bit more nuanced than just like positive thinking. So that's kind of where I would hope that, I hope that comes across in the project and in the music, especially as we release more.
Whether it's Olenka and the Autumn Lovers or the Positive People Band, where can people go to find out more about your amazing works?
Well, we've got our website, positivepeople.ca. Obviously, we have all of the socials, Instagram, Twitter, Bandcamp, whatever, like, except for TikTok. I don't want to make videos all the time. I don't have time. And then the Olenka project's website is olenkalovers.com. And again, all of the socials are there. Most of the Olenka socials are like Olenka Lovers. But yeah, it's findable, Google.
We have the technology.
That deep, dark overlord Google can help you find everything.
Have a story you'd like us to share, or communities we should highlight? Leave a comment on our social media or reach out to us on our website. I'm Ryan Funk. This was You Talk, and have yourself a good one.